Now, TSPN is proud to present Art and Culture with Kathleen Ball on TSPN.
Hello everyone, I'm Kathleen Ball, and tonight we're going to be offering Art and Culture with Kathleen Ball. I want to give you my contact information first, and you can get a hold of me either through email at kballadonai@gmail.com. Also, you can take a look at some of my other artwork at www.sculpture.org/Kathleen Ball. There's also a phone number if you'd like to reach me. I'm local, and my number is 209-754-9492. So, to start with, what we're going to introduce tonight is a bas-relief. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with bas-relief, what a bas-relief is a raised sculpture on a flat surface. So I brought one in that's completed. This is a bas-relief from 365 AD. This was taken from a excavation, actually. This was inspired by an excavation. And what this is a couple who and their baby. They had been in an earthquake, basically, on Kirion, a little island that's outside of Greece, and right outside of Crete, as a matter of fact. And what happened is the whole town was hit with an earthquake. And these people, at the moment that they knew that their death was upon them, they embraced with their child while everyone else was clawing and trying to get out of the situation and, obviously frightened. These people chose to do this. So this inspired me so much that I had to recreate the piece, and I've also done this in bronze. So this is a bas-relief example, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is a bas-relief. Bas-relief is on a flat surface, and you can see that. I've already drawn in the design so you can see the design. I'm taking the design from inspiration from Egypt, as a matter of fact, and I took a trip over to Egypt in 2011, and on that trip, as you can see here, we started off in Giza. I went to the pyramids, and this is one of the local Bedouins and his camel, and I actually rode one of these camels. Okay, I actually rode one of these camels. And so from there we went to Abu Ghraib, and you can see the bowls here. This is something that they have no explanation for in Egypt to this day. They still have no explanation. This is a typical cart, family-driven cart. The whole family is in this cart. It's donkey-driven. And here we are again, Abu Ghraib. And these are some of the symbols. Again, we have many of the symbols from Egypt, and those are also incorporated in this bas-relief. This is a bird called the Bennu bird, and this particular one was found in Dendura in Egypt. And you see this throughout some of the older sites, and this is typical bas-relief. This is in Luxor. This piece is in Luxor, and here we go. This is a Djed pillar. And on top of it is an ankh. And you see these throughout Egypt. They're at every single one of the sites, just about. And these older ones, again, are the raised bas-relief, which is what I'm doing here. It's a bas-relief. And so we have here Hatshepsut's, this is her temple. And again, we see the raised, these are the more ancient ones. These are the raised bas-reliefs. And we have our Djed pillar again. So here's some more of the symbols. These are some of the older ones. Now you can see the newer ones are dug into the background of the wall. They're actually carved into the wall. And some of the new, this is an older one. It's a combination of raised and receding. And this was a little island off of, outside of Elephantine Island. It was the original site of Isis's temple. It was later moved to Elephantine Island in Philae. And again, we had the same symbols again. It was so exciting for me because many of these symbols throughout Egypt, especially the djed and some of these bowls and things, they don't know what they signify. There are, there's a lot of contemporary writers and people now, they're studying these glyphs and they have some ideas, but basically they really don't know. They think they have to do with energy, and they think they have to do with the geometry of the spaces and geometry of the sites. All of these sites, all of the temples, all of the pyramids in Egypt are located on sacred sites, energy sites. And the dwellings, the buildings themselves, the temples, all of the symbols that have to do, that are on the walls and the pillars, all signify energy. Now, many people for many years have believed that, that these were all separate gods. However, they were not. If you go back far enough into the Commission belief system, which preceded Egypt, and they were the ones that brought forth the same belief system to the Egyptian people, they understood all of these symbols that related to Neters, which was spelled N-T-R, and later it was translated with the vowels to N-E-T-E-R-S, Neters. And what they were energy forms that gave birth to the universe and gave birth to physical manifestation and the planet that we live in today. So anyway, so these are just these wonderful symbols and just beautiful belief systems, and the people over there were just fantastic. So it inspired me to do several pieces, and of those pieces I've done wall pieces, I've done paintings, I've painted both Nefertiti, I've painted Akhenaten, who they both were during the Amarna period, and there's some influence into this piece that I'm doing today. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the tools that we're going to be using. And you can get these tools. They're right there on the screen for you. And you can get these tools in San Francisco at a place called Douglas and Sturgis. Now, these are specific sculpture tools. This one, we have a boxwood tool, a needle tool, another needle tool, and we have a wire tool. Now, these are available at Douglas and Sturgis, and they can be purchased online. You can actually get them online, or you can get them by telephone, or of course if you want to drive into San Francisco, which is a long trip for just a few tools. But you can reach Douglas and Sturgis by email, and their website is actually www.douglasandsturgis.com. There's a phone number here too if you're interested in that, which is 415-421-4456. And the proprietor's name is Artie, and he's a wealth of information. So this is where you would obtain these tools that I'm going to be using today. Also, we have a clay supplier. And the clay supplier is in Sacramento. It's right off of Highway 16, and it's called IMCO, I-M-C-O. And to reach IMCO, you would contact www.clayimco.com. Or you can email at customer service, and that is CUSTSERV@clayimco.com. They also have a phone number, which is 916-383-2811. And they're very easy to work with. They're wonderful people. Our manager and chemist over there who designs all the clay bodies, his name is Eric, and he's a fantastic person to work with and would be willing to help you with whatever you need. So we're now going to get into the actual bas-relief. When you're creating a slab for a bas-relief, one of the main tools you want to use is just a plain roller. Any kind of roller, anything that's round you can use, anything that's round that has a flat surface. You're going to roll your clay out. You're going to cut it with your clay wire, You'll be cutting your clay with your clay wire off the slab. Now your clay is going to come in a slab, and it'll be in a bag of 25 pounds in a box of two 25-pound bags. So your clay is going to be like this. You're going to take your clay wire and you'll be cutting your clay off in sections. So your slab, the top of your slab is about this wide by about this long. And so you're going to take about a 3/4 inch cut across your clay. You're going to put those side by side. There are 4 slabs into this particular bas-relief. So you're going to put those together, place them on top of your board, and then you'll be taking your rolling pin and rolling them flat out, okay, in preparation for whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So once you have that done, you'll be taking your needle tool. And this is our needle tool. We take our needle tool and our drawing, which we have here. And this drawing is made up of the symbols that we just saw from Egypt. So we'll be taking those and we're going to be drawing out with the needle tool. Okay. And when we come back, we're going to finish this, get back into this, and we'll show you more about the bas-relief. And we'll see you in just a few moments. Thank you.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so we're ready to go here. We have our bas-relief set and ready to go. We have most of our drawing is already lined out here. So the next step, we're going to go into our bag here, and I want to talk just for a minute about this bag. This is a bag that I've had for about 30 years. I found it in a thrift shop, and you could find something similar for your supplies. It was probably about 50 cents or something, not much. But it's a nice leather, sturdy bag. This is really great for carrying all the things that you need. And in this bag, I carry water, all my tools. I carry the plastic wrap that will cover this once we're complete. This can be purchased at the dollar store, by the way. And so can the water bottles. These can be purchased at the dollar store. This is just an empty hairspray bottle, and you can use those as well. Just clean them out really good. And then we have our extra clay that we're going to be building. Now, we talked about in the old ancient glyphs in Egypt that they were built up. So that is the style that we're going to be doing our bas-relief today. These are built up instead of recessed. In other words, we're not going to be digging in, we're going to be building up. So we're going to get some clay out here, and this is just a 405 sculpture mix from IMCO, which is a wonderful clay body to work with. And we want to get it nice and pliable here, and we're going to begin to lay on some of our pieces here. So we're going to start with, we usually start with the largest section, and our largest section here would be the pyramid. So we're going to go into that, and you just basically shape the clay into the form that you're applying it to. So I'm actually going to be creating a 3-dimensional pyramidal form here. So it's going to be built up and built up with the clay. Now, keep in mind that the pyramids, we talked a little bit about this, they're all built according to sacred geometric form. And that's very important because everything that they did in Egypt, especially in the Commission period of time, was done with a purpose. Every move they made, every building they built, every ceremony, everything they did was with a purpose. And the reason for this was that they would be aligned with nature. And it was very important for them to be aligned with the universe and be aligned with nature and all of the plants and animals and everything in nature. It was very important for them to live in a state of harmony. And they were a really good example of that. Egypt was a wonderful example of that. They're one of the few civilizations that lasted for 5,000 years in a state of harmony, basically. And they had wars like we do, but they stayed in existence longer than any other civilization to date on the planet. So they had something going on. And this is what is now, being researched by many, many, many scientists and friends of mine, people that I know, are researching this because we're wondering now, how did they sustain, how were they able to sustain a civilization with such peace and harmony for so long? And we today are unable to do that. And so what many scientists and some friends of mine, Dr. Ibrahim Karim, has brought forward some of this new technology based on ancient Egyptian biogeometry, structure, and figures and numbers. And what the purpose of this is to bring the old and combine it with the new. We are not obviously going to want all of us, we're never going to throw our cell phones away. We're never going to, we're never going to get rid of the, all these wonderful modern things that we have. And so what Dr. Ibrahim Karim has done is he has incorporated a system of biogeometry derived from ancient Egypt, derived from the mathematics and the sounds and the symbols that he has gone in and studied, and he's the second generation person to have done this, that combines the energies of ancient Egypt with, it brings into harmony with the communication devices that we have today. In other words, we won't have to we wouldn't have to get rid of our cell phones and things to reduce the electromagnetic currents in the air. We would simply be able to neutralize and balance those energies with the use of these new technologies. And they're popping up all over. I see them more and more and more as we, move into the modern age, because obviously, the things that we're doing have had an effect on our planet. So, we're now looking for ways to balance and neutralize these things. So here we are. Our bas-relief is coming along nicely. We have our second pyramid just about complete. And we're going to move into this bird. Now, this is a beautiful bird. This is a Bennu bird. And the Bennu bird actually was one of the most ancient birds in all of Egypt. And the Bennu bird is similar to many of our Native American cultures here in North America, similar to the phoenix that we see in many of the North American cultures. And the Bennu bird basically did the same thing that the phoenix did. He rose up into the sun and was burned up and reborn to the Egyptian people. And so he's a symbol of rebirth and regeneration. And he's also, it's believed by many that he will be reborn during this age, that the Bennu bird will be reborn during the modern age, bringing with him the wisdom of ancient Egypt for the benefit of mankind today. So he's sort of a special bird, and the way that I've depicted him in this bas-relief here, he's bringing information into someone here from our modern day. And what he's bringing is information that I've studied for, Dr. Karim's work. And this is a little box that he's designed, and these are biogeometrical devices, and they're little square devices, and we have one here in the bas-relief. And so the Bennu bird is one of the symbols that is transferring this information. to our modern day people. And he's a beautiful bird. He's actually a very beautiful bird. Birds were oftentimes used in Egyptian symbolism. We have Osiris, and we have several other birds that we'll talk about when we come back. So, okay, 4 minutes, okay. So, yeah, so we have, we have several birds, Osiris, and then there were thousands, there was hundreds and thousands of birds all throughout the Middle East, because we had the beautiful, beautiful Nile River. And the Nile was what the Egyptian people and all of Africa, as a matter of fact, all of the African cultures that lived along the Nile, they believed that the Nile gave them sustenance. And basically it did, because all of their food came from the Nile. They ate hippopotamus, which is something that we wouldn't be familiar here with in the West, but apparently it was rather good. They had their crocodiles. Their danger, was from the crocodiles. But everything came basically from the Nile. The Nile would flood once a year, and it would bring in, with its waters, it would bring in the silt from the bottom of the river and bring it in into the ground. And it was absolutely amazing. The soil over there, when I was in Egypt, is like this beautiful black soil. It's absolutely incredibly fertile. And the crops over there just grow really quickly because of the vitamin content in the soil. And it's beautiful. And actually, the ancient word Kenishan or Kemet comes from that word. It actually means the black land. And for many, many, many years, people thought that actually meant because the people's skins were black, but actually it's a reference to the land. It's a reference to the land itself. And it's because of that beautiful, beautiful, fertile black, incredibly rich black soil. So we're working on our bird here. We're getting his wings done and moving down into these beautiful, beautiful wings that he has here. The other thing I noticed too with the symbols in Egypt is that the original symbols that you see are not only, in addition to being raised, they're actually more graceful. There's a sense of grace about them. And as we move into the later Egyptian cultures, the symbols become a little more geometrical. It's really fascinating to see. So and then of course the Amarna period was a period that completely changed everything. So, and that didn't last very long. So, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this bas-relief, and we'll talk some more about the Amarna period and how the Amarna period came into be, and what exactly were the consequences of that, and how and why the Amarna period disappeared so rapidly. So, thank you. We'll see you in just a few moments.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so we were talking about the Amarna period in Egypt, which was it was an isolated period. It was a very interesting period. Amarna period began with Amenhotep III. And what he was, he went and he married a woman from a distant land, and she was his second wife, and so it was not customary for her descendants, in other words, her children of a pharaoh's second wife, to become pharaoh. But in this case, this happened, and Akhenaten, who was originally Amenhotep IV, was the product of Amenhotep III and his wife, Tyre. So she had a tremendous influence on the Pharaoh at this time in history. And so what happened is Akhenaten picked up the beliefs of his mother, and he influenced, his desire was to influence all of Egypt. He thought that this was such a wonderful belief system, in belief in one God, and that he thought that the whole of Egypt should worship this one God. Also, at the time, he was not particularly pleased with the fact that the priesthood had become tremendously corrupt. If you wanted anything done at that point in time, you had to go through the priesthood, and the priesthood, you know, they had to be supported, and they had to be supported in a lifestyle that they had become accustomed to. And by the time that Akhenaten reigned, the priesthood had so much power that they actually limited the pharaoh's own power. Well, Akhenaten married a very, very strong and powerful woman, Nefertiti, who was chosen by his mother, and they moved the entire city, capital city, from Memphis out to Amarna, and they moved it down the Nile River, a tremendous, many miles. And as I was traveling down the Nile, I realized how difficult that must have been for them to take everything in rafts. Everything went in barges and rafts down the Nile River, and they moved the entire capital city to Amarna. And at this point, they forbid the people to worship the old gods, and they returned the power to not only the priesthood, but the people not the priesthood, but the pharaohs, and the pharaoh's chosen family members were the ones that were running all of Egypt at this time. Akhenaten also believed in peace, so he didn't prepare well for war. And during Akhenaten's reign, much of Egypt, territories that had previously been controlled by Egypt and that Egypt collected taxes from, seceded from Egypt. And Akhenaten did nothing much about this. His son, Tutankhamun, which we are very familiar with over here in the United States, he was the one that ended up having to deal with the backlash of a lot of this stuff, a lot of the decisions that his father made. So during this time frame in history, though, the important thing that we want to talk about today was how did that affect the art? Now, what Akhenaten believed was that all of the artwork should be natural. And so for the first time in Egyptian art, you see family members of the royal family depicted as real people and natural. You saw the family together. You saw Akhenaten with his daughters. They had 5 daughters, he and Nefertiti. One of them died in childbirth, and they actually lost 2 more of their children. Only one survived that we know of that was married to Tutankhamun, that was a very common thing to do. Now, that wouldn't happen today, obviously, but that was a very common thing in Egypt, that daughters or sons and daughters were married to each other. Oftentimes, they were half brother and sister, but they were married to each other. So during the Amarna period, we have, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their beautiful daughters, and they're shown throughout the whole entire area of Amarna. They're on all the walls. They're on all the temples. They're on all the pillars. And this was to erase the old gods and bring this new pharaoh and his family into the minds of the people. And so they were inundated, basically, with the symbols that they were introduced by Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti and their family. And we want to remember that this was influenced by his mother. That this particular religious replacement was influenced by his mother. Now, his mother came from an African culture, that believed in one God. And the reason for that was because they didn't have they lived a very simplistic life. And when I took a boat down into Nubia, I was able to actually see an example of a lifestyle that Akhenaten's mother may have lived. Would have been very similar to what her existence would have been like. And this Nubian family, they lived very, very simply. Again, all their food came from the river. And they had very few belongings in their household. They had, they worshipped one God, and, their lifestyle was very simplistic compared to some of the main cities like Memphis and whatnot in Egypt. So this was what was going on during that time frame. And of course, as all things happen. When you make a change, you're going to have a backlash, and this is what happened. Eventually, there was a huge backlash, and the priesthood was very upset. So they regained some power, and the people had a difficult time adjusting to the new religion, especially without some of their old amulets. And this was one of the biggest issues, was that they were used to using amulets. They were used to using amulets for everything. They prayed throughout their day. Everything they did was revolved around these symbols and these amulets that they had used. And so now to no longer have these was a very difficult situation for them. So, of course, eventually you're going to have an uprising, and this is what happened. And as a result of this, Akhenaten and his wife had a very difficult time, on top of the fact that they lost all of their daughters except one. And the youngest daughter was the only survivor that we know of, that we have found the remains of, that actually lived into a relatively late stage in life. She was probably in her 20s when she passed away. She was married to Tut, to her half-brother, Akhenaten's son, and they lost the only two children that they had. And they believe today that that was probably the result of inbred marriage. These children were relatively deformed, and I saw them. They actually have them still in Egypt. You can go into Egypt, and you can see them in the museum in Cairo, these babies. And they're, the product of Akhenaten and Nefertiti's youngest daughter and her brother Tut. And you can see these horribly deformed children, which must have been incredibly sad for this family. So there were no heirs, direct heirs from the pharaoh, from Tut. However, there's been studies, and I've recently become aware of some studies that Tut's genealogy, his DNA, has been traced into several European cultures. And they say now that about 30% of the European males have DNA and genetic DNA from King Tut. So apparently there must have been something happening. He had other wives, or he had concubines, which was very common during that time frame. So his genetics did survive. And what happened when Tut came into power after his father, and they don't know if his father was killed, if he died, they don't know what happened to Nefertiti, actually, his beautiful wife. They do believe that Nefertiti may have been a co-regent, what they call co-regent with Tut for the beginning of his reign. However, they don't have any actual proof of that. She may have done that, or possibly very possibly his confidant, they think, may have been also someone who guided Tut through his early reign. Now, what Tut did was he took back the Aten. He got rid of the Aten and took on the Tutankhamen, and went back to the Amen ending of his name. And the reason he took this on was because he was signifying to the people that he was taking back the old gods. Now, this was very important in Egypt. It was important to the people, and it was important to the priesthood. because what it was saying to the priesthood and what it was saying to the people is that I as Pharaoh have returned to the ancient gods, to the old gods, and we are going to be living our lives that way. So he moved back to Memphis. Everything came back to Memphis, and we're going to talk about that at some depth in just a few minutes here. But he moved the entire royal family back to Memphis, and what happened in Amarna was just incredible destruction at that point. They started taking down all the temples. They took down the palace, Nefertiti and Akhenaten's palace. They completely obliterated it. They destroyed much of the artwork, and they destroyed much of what was left in Amarna, and it was buried under the sand. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Memphis. We're going to move back into Memphis.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.
Okay, welcome back. And we're just about to finish this bas-relief here. And before we do, I want to give you some contact information one more time. My name is Kathleen Ball, and you can reach me at, email is kball@gmail.com. We also have a website if you're interested in looking at some of my work. It's www.sculpture.org/Kathleen Ball, or you can reach me at the local phone number, which is 209-754-9492. So anyhow, so here we are. We have our Bennu bird, and our Bennu bird is getting close to being completed here. And we are in Memphis in Egypt. Now Memphis is an amazing, absolutely amazing site. If you ever get to Egypt, it's one of the most incredible sites. Huge temple complexes. And this is where they returned the capital when Akhenaten's son, Tutankhamun, took over the reign of Egypt and became Pharaoh. And he and his sister, co-regents actually, and reigned in Egypt for 17 years. He was 9 years old when he actually came into power in Egypt, which is a very young age, which is why they believe that there's a possibility that his mother actually assisted him for some time, dressed as a man. Now, this was not uncommon, actually. Hatshepsut, which I have a very difficult time pronouncing her name, but she was also a female ruler in Egypt many, many years before this, and she also dressed like a man, and many believed her to be a man. So this was not an uncommon thing. And since they have no idea what actually happened to Nefertiti, they think that this may have happened, and then that she may have just sort of receded off and went back into her native land where her ancestors were from and her family was from. But they really don't know. They really don't know. So until they actually find her remains, there's been a few attempts, and then the head of antiquities in Egypt was really excited a couple of years ago because they thought they'd actually found Nefertiti's remains, and it turned out it was not. It turned out it was Akhenaten's mother. It was one of the secondary wives, and it was I think as the servant actually was one of the other family members, but they did not find the remains of Nefertiti. So that's still a mystery. So they returned to Memphis, and so now business as usual. We have the priesthood is back in power. You know, Tut is faced with dealing with wars on all of the borders, just about in Egypt. Everyone had rebelled, and everyone had tried to recede from Egypt. Not everyone, but many, many, many of the the countries and subsidiaries that Egypt had once controlled, Tut is now left with having to bring them back into the fold. And, you know, the primary reason that ancient civilizations, and, you know, even this is true today, had control of other regions that were not typically part of their country, per se, was because they collected the taxes. And this is what brought money into the royal family for buildings and for, you know, their chariots and for just all sorts of things that they wanted to use, you know, that they needed to do for their temple decorations and just all the things that they thought were important. So here we are. We were faced with, we had a situation, we're back in Memphis, but we were basically broke. Akhenaten spent a great deal of money creating these buildings. I mean, just a massive city almost overnight. I mean, literally, Amarna rose from the sand in 20 years. I mean, completely was built in a 20-year time frame, which is unheard of. I mean, the amount of manual labor must have been absolutely tremendous to be able to achieve this. It was a monumental feat, and all of that cost a great deal of money. And of course, Akhenaten, by this time, had gone through the purse. He'd gone through the money. So what was left went into moving the people back to Memphis and you know, and trying to rebuild and recoup what they could. And so here we are. So Tut is actually off in, he's fighting wars. And he was injured in many of these wars. He was actually seriously injured. They found out through the archaeological record, when they did find his remains, they found out that he actually had probably died from a disease, bacteria, that derived from a broken femur bone, which must have been tremendously painful. But he had a broken femur bone that he'd broke either, you know, in a war, that they don't know exactly which one, and that he lived with this pain for you know, the rest of his life. So anyway, it was typical, though, that a pharaoh during that time frame did not show any weakness, and especially with a man in Tutankhamun's position, because of everything that had gone on in Egypt. And here he is trying to create an aura of power. He wants to bring all these other cultures back into the fold, and he cannot show weakness. So here, you know, here he is with this broken femur bone and very, very sick and very, very weak, unable to show any of that to his people. So when, after Tutankhamun passed and the next pharaoh was not part of the same royal family. And what happened at this point, it was the beginning of the deterioration of Egypt. We had had a break in the symbols. We had had a break for 20 years during the reign of Akhenaten. And we had basically divided. People were divided. And they, you know, many people were true to the old gods, and many were true to Akhenaten's new god, even though they had moved back to Memphis. And so we had a lot of division, unfortunately. There was a tremendous amount of division. And remember, too, that before Akhenaten moved everything to Amarna, the reason he did this was because of corruption. So we have a tremendous amount of corruption, you know, that is going on. And, of course, that didn't stop. So we have that going on. We have the wars going on. And slowly but surely, Egypt began to lose its power over the years. And so, you know, so we have the symbolism that has brought us the history and told us the story of Egypt, and and we have the people, and we have some of the ancient cultures. Now, when I was over there, I had the wonderful honor to meet with the Commission Oral Traditions Keeper, a man named Yusef Awiyan. He was the oldest son in the family, and his position was to carry on the oral traditions of the Commission people as taught to him by his father. And so I was able to find out, and to interview this man and talk to him about, what they believe is going to be the next phase or the future for Egypt. And as we all know, there's a tremendous amount of upheaval. There's a lot of stuff going on in Egypt right now. Lots of stuff going on. I was there during the revolution. I was in Tahrir Square during the revolution, which was a very interesting time to be in Egypt. And they're still dealing with a tremendous amount of upheaval over there, and no one really knows exactly what's going to happen. So, what my friends over there, have told me about is that, Egypt is still very positive. The energy of the people is very strong, and they still believe that Egypt is going to be coming into the modern day and having something very wonderful to offer. So they're looking back into these ancient symbols and like I mentioned before, the biogeometry, to be able to find out how did Egypt last for so many centuries, and how were they able to continue for so long. So I'm going to show you what we have here so far. We have quite a bit of detail work to do, but this is typical of an ancient bas-relief, Egyptian bas-relief. And I call this one past, present, and future, and there's, there's more detail work we have to do. But we have our 3 pyramids in Giza. We have the Bennu bird from Dendera. We have the stars that were on the ceiling, the symbols of eternity from Dendera, and the fact that past, present, and future is all one. And we have a common day woman that this information is being transferred to. And here we have in the lower corner, we have Dr. Karim's box that brings the energy from the ancient time in Egypt and blends it with the energy of the new, so that we can neutralize some energies on this planet. So until next time, my name is Kathleen Ball. We thank you so much for coming and tuning into our show tonight, and we hope to see you again really soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching Art and Culture with Kathleen Ball on TSPN.